Hey everybody, Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Already towards hump day and heading towards the back half of the week. Who would have thought? Passed by really quickly. The year's closing pretty fast, and with that, as we get towards this weekend, we're looking at the threat of severe weather here, and the thing with this setup is there's been so many changes, like literally on a run by run basis. This thing's looked entirely different. It's looking different now, so make sure you're hitting that like button, decimate that subscribe button if you're new here, and also obliterating that share button as well. Because I almost wonder if this is going to trend back to what it was before. Kind of be better if it didn't, but either way, here we go. Taking a deep dive. A few things to make note of with this severe weather setup. I did call a little bit of an expansion of this area off to the north and east a little bit, and now we're beginning to see this, but this is also starting to take a little bit more of that look to where it might be more of a linear event than a possible all mode type event. I do think tornadoes are still possible, but we might be trending more towards a damaging wind event, and I'm going to show you exactly why. Areas in here, the areas to the east that we're looking at now, Jackson, Tennessee, Memphis as well, Greenville, Mississippi, kind of was in there at the beginning, but now we're definitely solidified at this point. Jackson in there as well, Alexandria, Louisiana, Shreveport, of course, Little Rock, Arkansas, Lufkin, Houston, and many others. So really no surprise to, or really not too much difference, I should say, as far as the cities in this area, the larger cities. But up to about 12 million people could be under the gun here on Saturday. So definitely something to still keep watch of, regardless of what the main hazard type is likely to be. But we'll go ahead and actually take a look at just exactly why we've kind of gone away from that potential tornado outbreak look. And not entirely, I should say, just a little bit of a change here. It's actually a notable change, but it's kind of hard to really put together the words that I have for this setup here. But we've pretty much were originally starting with a negatively tilted trough where we're kind of watching the trough kind of be more oriented this way. This is what we were seeing before, but if we were to go to what we have now, you're going to see quite a difference. Here's that trough forming. And notice now, instead of it kind of pointing this way towards the this little section is now actually pointing this way, which would actually be a positively tilted trough. Positively tilted troughs can still produce severe weather. Like here's a good example of it. You can still get warm air and moisture out ahead of it. You can still get a pretty good bit of lift, but those negatively tilted troughs are usually much better at drawing in more moisture, creating more instability, and usually having a good bit of wind energy along with it. So with this change here, and this is also prevalent on the GFS as well as the Euro, you know the typical rules by now if you've been on the channel for long enough since we've started doing this two-screen setup here. Euro is to the left, GFS to the right, and we're seeing pretty much the same thing. There is that positively tilted trough kicking in here. It actually takes a little bit more of a positive tilt just looking at it on the GFS more so than the Euro. Both of these are 18Z runs. So the thing to make note of here is that we're starting to see a little bit more model agreement too. In previous runs, we were kind of on the fence because models were showing a bunch of different outcomes. Some were showing this being negatively tilted, positively tilted. Timing of this was different, but we're starting to get to a point where things are becoming a little bit more clear. One thing I also want to make note of here by looking at this is we also can look at this from different levels. We'll look at 500 on both of these runs here. Is that just as quickly as this can have a positively tilted look, it could change its orientation to neutral or even negative. So have to take this with a grain of salt. Another video will be made tomorrow since we're within a range of other models now. So that's going to be something that we're keeping an extra close eye on here. But here's another look at it. Like I said, definitely started to take that shift towards positive tilt for sure here on both Euro and GFS here. Here's a look at the GFS as well. And it's pretty clear to see. And I think a big part of that is this little piece of energy that ends up popping up to the north here. Watch what ends up happening there. That low originally was a little bit further to the south here. And now that it's pushed further to the north, it's pretty much change the progression of this trough. And this is what I was talking about towards the earlier phases when we were starting to even really hone in on this. And it's one of those kind of unforeseen factors that can play the role in changing a severe weather threat entirely here. Wintertime setups are just funny like that, if I'm being honest. But that's what we have going on at the 300 and 500 levels. This also has pretty much changed the low-level jet here as well. We'll go ahead and look at both of these. We'll start out, of course, with the Euro, considering that's 90-hour run now. This is also the other reason why I don't really like using 18Z Euro, because I only get 90 hours out of it versus 12Z, which is 240. But since we're within range now, it's okay. I always try to get you guys the most up-to-date information I can get my hands on. But here we are looking Friday into Saturday. And here is Friday. There's actually a marginal risk that's been issued here, right towards this region off to the west of our Saturday slight risk. There's a decent bit of low-level jet, but I think the storm's going to end up ultimately being elevated. And that's the threat for Friday, will probably be some isolated large hail. As we go towards Saturday afternoon, Saturday morning, things don't really seem like they're coming together in the same manner as I saw them before. Maybe a little bit later in the evening, a low-level jet comes in, but I think it's going to be lagging a little bit too much. That's another calling card of these positively tilted troughs. The kinematics kind of go a little bit awry. With the negatively tilted troughs, you can get ingredients to come together a little bit more smoothly here. The timing is usually a little bit better sometimes. It's not a it's never a shoe-in with these, but it's pretty much a similar deal in GFS. It looks a little bit better, but not by much. So I'm actually would once again expect to see some changes on that I can't even speak right now. I can expect some changes here on the severe weather outlook map as we go into day 3 and then eventually even day 2. But of course, this is heavily dependent on how the models continue to trend. So if we were to go ahead and look at things such as moisture returns, we still have them. We still have a moisture return. We still have sufficient temperatures. It's just not going to be in the to the same extent for the ideal parameters that we once had, as far as what we were looking at about 2 or 3 days ago. See, here's our moisture return right here, and here's our frontal boundary. We still have the lift that we would need for these storms to get going, but it's going to be more of a limited window, and I also think a little bit more convection is going to happen here. It's going to be kind of a little bit closer to a similar setup to what we saw over here towards Southeast Texas about a week ago, possibly. Could be, of course, I could be wrong, but this is kind of just what it's. This is kind of just going. I'm just kind of going off of what I see here, really. If we were to go and look at the GFS as well, it's a very similar deal. Good moisture return on Friday evening, even. And then on Saturday, it's pretty much a similar deal. Front's lagging back a little bit further. Maybe there might be a chance of a slightly better setup, but I still think it's going to be a similar outcome here. Be really interesting to see what we're looking at tomorrow, especially as we get in range of the convective models, or at least within the range of about one of them, I should say. But it's pretty much what we have going on with the moisture return there. Still sufficient, like we were talking about earlier. And then if we go to temperatures here, I don't know why we're back to moisture here. We'll get that fixed up real quick. Guess you'll get to see it load in the process. But here's the time frame again. This is going through the 7th and 8th all the way up to the 9th, which is D-Day here in this case. And you can see that we still get good temperatures here. We're getting into the mid 70s, some 80s even possible here in the early afternoon. And that's really going to be where the flash point ends up being, is right across this region here. My area still hasn't changed, personally speaking, as far as severe weather is concerned. Maybe a little bit of a drop more to the south here, where I was kind of originally looking a little bit more towards the tri-state line between Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We might be looking at Louisiana, Mississippi line here, maybe Texas, Louisiana as well. Could be 2 different points of interest in particular for the development of tornadoes. I just want to make sure I clarified. But in both outcomes here, I've kind of been noticing this trend, because even at work, while I've had time occasionally, I've been kind of keeping an eye on the models here. Been trying to do that more for the channel, but like I said, still a sufficient warm sector here. No question about it. With the moisture return and still the kinematics available, we could still see all forms of severe weather. All hazards are possible, but I'm definitely leaning more so towards the damaging wind event. Like I said, the trough progression was going to be the key to everything pretty much at this point. Also, the threat of flooding is also another thing that hasn't been talked about much, but we'll probably be talking about that more starting tomorrow. So next things to look at here. Oh wow, I have a duplicate. That's weird. Next thing I'm going to be looking at here will also be surface cape. I don't know why I have dupes here, but anyway, I'm going to start out looking at the mixed layer cape, which is available on the Euro, and the surface cape is available on the GFS. Each of these are unique in their own way. Mixed layer cape, we're kind of looking towards all levels of the atmosphere as far as our severe weather potential is concerned, whereas the surface, we're kind of looking more towards the low level of the atmosphere, which is about 0 to 1 kilometers, I would say. But if you look here, the cape is still pretty plentiful and sufficient enough earlier in the afternoon, and it actually does kind of increase a little bit more as we head later into the evening on Saturday. So it does kind of raise an eyebrow as far as the potential for maybe a little bit a late night, maybe nocturnal threat with this. And the instability kind of holds up pretty well. So like I said, just because we have a positive tilt trough doesn't mean that we can't get severe weather. But this instability here definitely gets my attention as well. Do I think they'll do away with the slight risk? No, but there could be a chance that they push this off west. If we were to look at a heliograph, for example, though, you can kind of see a big difference in comparison to what we were originally seeing. Whereas before we were kind of pushing a little bit higher towards the low level, towards the low levels being a little bit stronger. Usually when you see it riding that x-axis just directly upward like that, like this, for example, I gotta change my marker really quick. All right, I got that figured out now. Sorry for the wait. But what I was talking about was the 0 to 3 kilometer right here, the low levels. Whenever what we were looking at about a few days earlier, this was looking a little bit stronger here. We're seeing this kind of go in a straight up the x-axis here, and what we ended up seeing was something a little bit more like that. It wasn't exactly like this. It was probably a little bit less impressive, but still, when you see more of that, that usually is a really good indicator of strong low-level wind shear. Now we're kind of looking a little bit more like what we see here especially at the 0 to 3 kilometer here, and this is kind of leaning more into a linear type event, which would favor damaging winds. You can still get embedded tornadoes with this, but it's definitely not to the same potential as what we once had. There's probably still a couple areas where we have to be extra watchful of those parameters, especially as we go throughout the day on Saturday here. But we'll be, of course, we'll be covering it here, especially since I'm not working on Saturday. It shouldn't be any issue. But if we look on the GFS, it's pretty much going to be a similar deal. I don't think there's going to be too much discrepancy at this point between the GFS and the Euro now, since we're starting to get much closer within range of the event here. There is a slight difference with the surface cape. Surface cape tends to usually end up being a little bit higher versus the mixed layer. It's not uncommon to see that. And this is kind of what I was talking about a little bit here. You still see pretty decent 0 to 1 kilometer shear here. And this kind of leans a little bit closer towards the embedded supercell setup. But there's also some struggles here that we have going on with this. It'll help inhibit. It's a good lifting mechanism. But one thing to make note of is the lapse rates are relatively weak. But other parameters here are good, but definitely not what they once were before. At one point we were seeing storm weather felicities over 200. Now we're starting to see drop all the way to the 140s. Like I said, tornadoes can still occur, but one thing I've also noticed is that the D cape or downdraft or downward cape is gone up notably. Whereas before we were seeing a lot of 700s, now we're getting up to the 945s into the thousands. Put it in perspective for you, the threshold is usually about 800 as a minimal for severe we've definitely surpassed that here. So I would still be on guard for all three hazards, but I'm mainly thinking we're going to be starting to trend a little bit more towards a damaging wind threat in the coming days leading up to Saturday. Of course, as I've said in the earlier part of this video, this can easily go back the other way so quickly. So the last thing we'll do here is we'll go ahead and take a look at the what the radar really could look like at this point. Not really ready to go all the way into composite reflectivity. I think I'm going to wait until I get to the convective models with that. Those of you that have followed the channel for a bit here, knowing how we cover severe weather setups, usually I'll look at the composite reflectivity. But I think that's going to be more of a thing that I'll do tomorrow, considering we probably will be in range of the NAM 3 kilometer, but I'm not entirely sure yet. Like I said, we usually will do better with the more information that we get available to us. And still just, we're right on the edge of being able to get a decent amount of information, but not all of it. But here is what we're looking at around Saturday. This is around prime time for the storms to develop. Mostly, see what I'm talking about, it's mostly looking linear at this point now. Still have to be on the lookout for embedded supercells that could occur within the line and maybe even out ahead of it. This also looks like it's trending towards a nocturnal threat, especially on the Euros end of things here. And then we have what's likely to be a soaker the following day for the southeast here. Could be a chance of severe weather further off to the south here, especially towards south of Alabama, southwestern Georgia, and maybe the Florida Panhandle. But outside of that, I wouldn't expect too much out of it. Then if we were to go ahead and look over to the GFS, it's pretty much a similar deal here. That low pushes off so far to the north here, and I think that's a really big inhibitor, because if we had that negative tilt going, that low usually would end up being placed a little further to the south. If we had that happening over, if we had this low pressure over towards, let's say, Missouri and Illinois here, not only would there be a chance of snowfall here, but we would have a little bit more lift generated, and we'd have a faster progressing trough. Now keep in mind, these low pressure areas are sometimes really hard to predict, so it could easily go the other way again. But right now, confidence seems pretty high that we're dealing with a possibly tilted trough. So this also leans more into that damaging wind threat, which we kind of see reflective on also the GFS as well. And then pretty much the similar deal for Sunday. Going to end up seeing most likely a mid-morning, early day washout, and then the back half of the day, leading into sunset, it'll probably clear up, but also it's also going to cool down notably. But with that being said, that's really all I got for you guys on this video. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it useful. If you did, you know what to do. Smash that like button. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. Obliterate that share button. Let people know that we're out here. And I'll see you guys tomorrow, of course, especially as we draw closer towards this event. Till next time, though, it's been Metalhead Weatherman. You guys have a good night. See you soon.